Welcome back. There's a moment in Fight Club where the narrator stands in his apartment and the camera slowly pulls back to reveal that everything he owns is labelled like an IKEA catalogue. His entire life is a showroom, and when it explodes, when all of it burns, there's something that feels less like tragedy and more like relief. That feeling is probably one of the reasons why the film still resonates over 25 years later. Not the twist or the soap or the punching, the relief, the fantasy of opting out, of saying, I refuse to participate in this, whatever this is, career, consumption, the performance of a functional life. I'm going underground instead. But what Fight Club never really asks is, what happens after you go underground? What does it look like when dropping out isn't a manifesto, it's a Tuesday? When the underground isn't a fight club or a movement, but just the place you live now, because you can't remember how to live anywhere else? There's a Hungarian film from 2003 called Kontroll that asks exactly this question. And if Fight Club was formative for you, if it cracked something open in your brain about refusal, about identity, about the way modern life can feel like sleepwalking, then Kontroll is the film you need to see next. Not because it's the same movie, but because it's the other half of the conversation. So Kontroll takes place entirely in the Budapest metro. We never see the surface, we never see daylight. Our protagonist, Bolshu, is a ticket collector, one of those people who checks whether passengers have valid passes. He works in the tunnels, he sleeps in the tunnels. At some point in his past, he had a life above ground, but we learn almost nothing about what happened. He simply descended and stayed. His team is a collection of misfits. A narcoleptic, a hothead, a nervous rookie, and a man with an almost superhuman inability to care. They spend their shifts being cursed at, spat on, dodged and humiliated by passengers who despise them. And around the edges of this world, someone or something is pushing people onto the tracks. A hooded figure appears and vanishes. People die. This is the setup, and already you can probably feel the resonance with Fight Club. But Kontroll is playing a very different game. Both films understand that underground is never just a location, it's a psychological state. In Fight Club, the basement is where you go to feel real. The pain is the point. Tyler Durden builds a world beneath the world, and it's seductive because it has rules, hierarchy, purpose. Everything the surface lacks, just inverted. Kontroll takes the same metaphor, but strips it of the romance. The metro isn't seductive, it's fluorescent lit and dirty and monotonous. Nobody chose to be there because it felt more authentic than the life above. They're there because the surface became impossible for them, in ways the film isn't interested in fully explaining. Bolshu doesn't give speeches about the emptiness of modern life. He doesn't have a manifesto. He just can't go up. The underground in Kontroll isn't rebellion, it's gravity. And that distinction is everything. Fight Club shows you the fantasy of refusal. Kontroll shows you the reality of it, the way opting out can calcify, the way a temporary retreat can become a permanent address. Both films are fundamentally stories about masculinity, but they diagnose the problem completely differently. Fight Club is explicit about it, almost didactic. These are men who feel castrated by comfort, men raised by absent fathers, numbed by office work, sold a version of manhood they can never access. Tyler Durden arrives as the corrective, physical, dominant, sexually free, dripping with a charisma that's inseparable from his capacity for violence. The film's answer to masculine crisis is more masculinity, rawer, harder, pushed to extremes. Pain becomes proof of existence. Hierarchy reasserts itself. Fight Club becomes Project Mayhem, becomes something that looks uncomfortably like fascism. And this is the thing about Fight Club that becomes harder to ignore the further we get from 1999. The film knows this is fascism. It knows. And it still spends 2 hours making it look cool. It bathes Tyler in golden light. It gives him the best lines. It lets Brad Pitt be Brad Pitt, shirtless, smoking, utterly in command. The film wants to have it both ways, to critique the seduction while also being the seduction, to say this is dangerous while also making you wish you were this dangerous. The tension isn't subversive, it's a failure of nerve. The film is too in love with its own villain to fully commit to the warning. The men in Fight Club define themselves through what they can do to each other, to the world around them. In Rebellion, their masculinity is active, performative, spectacular. It demands an audience. Kontroll has no interest in any of this. The men in Kontroll aren't in crisis about their masculinity. They're not trying to reclaim anything. Bolshu isn't angry about being emasculated by consumer culture. He isn't yearning for a war to fight or a father to defy. He's depressed. He's stuck. And the film frames this not as an indictment of softness or an absence of traditional manhood, but as something more universal, a spiritual paralysis that has nothing to do with gender ideology and everything to do with the ordinary human capacity to simply go numb, to lose access to wanting anything at all. His team reflects this. These men are gentle with each other. They bicker and joke and fall asleep on each other's shoulders. Their bonds are built on shared humiliation and mutual affection, not on pain and dominance. Nobody is proving anything to anyone. When there is a competition, the rail running scenes, it's played as absurd, self-destructive, slightly pathetic. It's not cathartic, it's not cool. It's men risking their lives because they're bored and broken and have confused adrenaline with feeling alive. The film sees this clearly and refuses to glamorize it. And this refusal is the key difference. Kontroll never once asks you to admire self-destruction. It never frames recklessness as attractive. It looks at broken men and says, this is sad, this is human. This deserves compassion, but it's not aspirational. Both films give their protagonist a dark double. In Fight Club, it's Tyler Durden, the charismatic, beautiful, dangerous version of the self, the id made flesh. And the film's famous twist reframes everything. The enemy was always internal. In Kontroll, there's the hooded figure, the pusher, who shoves commuters in front of oncoming trains. The film is ambiguous about who this figure is. It might be a separate person. It might be Bolshu himself. We see him black out. We see him in the wrong places at the wrong time. The film gives us just enough to wonder without ever confirming. But here's what's interesting. Where Tyler Durden represents vitality, chaos, life pushed to manic extremes, the pusher in Kontroll represents pure death. There's no ideology to it, no philosophy, just an empty hood and a shove into darkness. If Tyler is the death drive dressed up as liberation, the pusher is the death drive with no costume at all, just the void. This is where Kontroll is more honest than Fight Club, because the death drive isn't cool. It isn't Brad Pitt in a leather jacket with a perfect quip. The desire to destroy yourself and others doesn't come wrapped in charisma and sex appeal, or if it does, that should horrify us rather than attract us. Fight Club accidentally built a monument to the thing it claimed to critique. Entire generations of young men watched it and came away wanting to be Tyler Durden, not recognizing him as a disease. The film failed them, not because the material isn't smart, but because the execution is too seductive, too gorgeous, too in love with its own darkness. Kontroll's pusher is no one's aspiration. No one watches this film and wants to be the hooded figure. And that's not a limitation. It's a sign that the film understands something that Fight Club doesn't. You don't defeat the shadow by making it beautiful. You defeat it by seeing it clearly, as emptiness, as the end of the line. Both films have a woman who represents the possibility of return. And this is where we need to be honest about what both films are doing and what they're failing to do. In Fight Club, it's Marla, and Marla is vivid. She's confrontational, darkly funny, unapologetically chaotic. She has a physicality and a presence that makes her impossible to ignore. And narratively, she functions as the real that keeps breaking through the narrator's constructed unreality. She is the evidence that other people exist, that solipsism has limits. But does Marla exist for herself? What does she want? What is her arc? If you look closely, the answer is she doesn't have one. She's exactly the same person at the end of the film as she is at the beginning. She hasn't changed, grown, or chosen anything. The men orbit and explode and fragment and reconstruct around her, and she stands there. Brilliant, yes. Magnetic, yes. But ultimately static. A mirror, a test, a reward. The film needs her to be impossible to integrate into the narrator's fantasy, so it makes her abrasive. The film needs her to be worth returning to, so it makes her sexy and sharp. But the film never asks what she needs. Her suicide attempts are played for dark comedy. Her emotional life is visible only insofar as it reflects the narrator's dysfunction back at him. Marla is a great presence, but she's not really a person. She's the surface, the real, but only as seen from underground. This connects to Fight Club's broader gender problem. In a film so obsessed with masculinity, women can only be the other, the thing masculinity defines itself against or returns to. Marla can't be a full person because the film's thesis requires her to remain exterior to the masculine journey. She's locked out by design. She's the trophy at the end of the self-destruction arc, the proof that the narrator has healed enough to deserve a woman. The film doesn't seem to realize how regressive that framing is. Kontroll's Sophie is a different kind of problem. She rides the metro dressed in a bear costume. She's playful, ethereal, kind. She takes an interest in Borshu, sees something in him worth reaching. And she lives above ground. She descends, but always returns to the surface. She is explicitly a lifeline. If we're being honest, Sophie is even less of a realized character than Marla. We know almost nothing about her. She has no arc, no visible interior life, no contradictions. She's gentle and whimsical and available. And that's all she is. She functions almost entirely as a symbol. The bear costume makes this overt, almost fairy tale-like. She's not a woman so much as she is an invitation. Come back up. Come back to the living. Both films use their female characters as mechanisms for male salvation. Both position the woman as the surface, the real, the alternative to self-destruction. Neither gives her a full inner life, so both films are, in this respect, limited. But the nature of that limitation is different, and that difference is important. Kontroll's failure with Sophie is not ideological, it's structural. The film isn't making an argument about gender. It just isn't interested in her interiority. She's a symbol in a film that trades in symbols. The tunnel, the escalator, the hooded figure. And the film treats her with the same poetic shorthand it applies to everything else. This doesn't excuse it, A symbol where a person should be is still a hollow space, but it means the problem is a lack of depth rather than an active framework that excludes her. And there's one crucial distinction in how the films handle the final gesture. Fight Club ends with Marla being told things will be okay by a man with a hole in his cheek and blood on his shirt while buildings collapse behind them. She's collected, retrieved. The narrator has defeated Tyler and now he gets the girl. It's a hero's reward structure that the film hasn't really earned and Marla hasn't consented to. But Kontroll gives Sophie agency in its final moment. She extends her hand. She asks, she's the one with the power of the invitation. And the question is whether Bolshu is capable of accepting, whether he's healed enough to say yes to someone else's offer. He isn't rescuing her. He isn't claiming her. He's being asked whether he can receive something. The dynamic is one of grace rather than possession. So both films could have been braver with their women, but one frames salvation as something earned and taken, the other frames it as something offered and the courage required to accept it. I don't want to give you the impression that Kontroll is some grim, austere European art film. It really isn't. It's genuinely funny and frequently hilarious. The banter between the inspectors, the absurd hostility of the passengers, a recurring subplot about rival inspection teams competing with an intensity that wildly exceeds anything their job should inspire. The film has energy and warmth and a deep affection for its characters that Fight Club deliberately withholds. Fight Club needs you to feel alienated. It creates distance so that the violence feels cathartic. But Kontroll wants you to feel close. It builds an ensemble with the care of a hangout movie. These are people you'd want to spend time with, even in a fluorescent tunnel. That warmth makes the stakes feel different. When Bolshu flirts with self-destruction, it matters because we've come to care about him. We like him. The film has allowed him to be ordinary, not cool, not a badass, just a man who makes people laugh and can't figure out how to save himself. Fight Club is a film about the seduction of opting out. Kontroll is a film about the aftermath. One is a manifesto, the other is a morning after. One asks, what if you burned it all down? The other asks, okay, you burned it all down. Now what? Are you going to live down here forever? And honestly, I think Kontroll is the braver film because it refuses the easy thrill. It never gives you a figure to worship. It never makes destruction look like freedom. It never confuses charisma with truth. It just looks at a broken person with clear eyes and immense compassion and asks whether healing is possible. Fight Club diagnosed something real. The alienation it described, the feeling of being nowhere, of performing a life without living it, all that resonated with people for a reason. But its prescription was poison dressed up as medicine. It said the answer is to become harder, more violent, more extreme, to split yourself in two and let the beautiful, dangerous half take over. And a generation of young men took that seriously in ways the film should have foreseen and didn't. Or it did foresee and just chose not to care about. Kontroll offers no prescription at all. It doesn't know how to fix you. It doesn't pretend that destruction is secretly liberation or that there is a cool version of despair. It just says you're in a tunnel. You've been in this tunnel for a long time. There is an escalator. There is a hand reaching towards you. Are you brave enough to take it? The Budapest metro, fluorescent lights, a woman in a bear costume extending her hand. The whole world waiting for you at the top of the escalator. No explosions, no speeches, no broken glass. Just a man deciding whether he wants to live. Enjoy the movie.